There is a thought that tends to come up quietly, often in a reflective moment rather than a dramatic one, where you pause and begin to wonder why nothing really seems to be changing in your life. Even though you feel like you're trying, thinking about it, planning things, and telling yourself that this time will be different. And what makes that thought more difficult is that it does not come from a lack of awareness, because you already know what you should be doing. You have probably thought about it more than once, and maybe even taken a few steps towards it. And yet, something about it does not quite move forward in the way you expected. Hi, I'm Bhavna, founder of the Inspirited Life Co. And on this channel, we explore leadership, lifestyle, and personal growth through reflection and real life experience, creating space to think more clearly about how we live, how we work, and how we lead ourselves. What I see quite often is that this feeling of being stuck does not come from something obvious, because on the surface, it looks like you are making an effort. You are thinking about what needs to change, and sometimes even starting, which makes it confusing when nothing really shifts in a lasting way. For a few days, it may feel like something is moving, as though this time might be different, and then gradually, without any clear reason, things begin to fade, and you find yourself returning to the same routines, the same thoughts, and eventually the same feeling of being in the same place again. And over time, that begins to feel like a loop. Most people look at this and assume it must be a discipline issue, or that they are not consistent enough, or even that they are being lazy, because that is often the easiest explanation to reach. But most of the time, that is not really what is happening. Because if you look a little deeper, it is not that you do not want to change. It is that something underneath that effort is not moving, and that is what keeps the pattern in place. If you begin to observe this more closely, there are a few patterns that usually sit behind this. One of the most common is mental fatigue, because you spend a lot of time thinking about what you need to do, even when you're not actually doing it. And that constant loop of planning, analyzing, and revisiting the same thoughts can become more exhausting than taking action itself. Another pattern is waiting to feel ready, where you tell yourself that you will start properly when things feel clearer, or when motivation feels stronger, or when life feels more settled. And while that sounds reasonable, the challenge is that this right moment rarely arrives in the way we expect. And then there is a quieter pattern, which is avoidance. Not in an obvious way, but in small delays, distractions, or choosing easier things over what actually matters. And usually, if you look closely, there is something slightly uncomfortable underneath that you're not quite ready to face. When these patterns continue, what you experience is that feeling of being stuck, even though you're trying, because your effort is still operating within the same pattern. And that is why it feels like nothing is changing. It is not because you are not making an effort, but because the pattern behind the effort is still the same. If you reflect on your own experience, you may recognize moments where you felt mentally tired without doing much, or where your mind felt heavy because you were carrying too many unfinished thoughts, or where you knew what needed to be done but found it difficult to begin. Instead of trying to change everything at once, which often creates more pressure than clarity, it may help to shift your attention in a simpler way by asking yourself one honest question. What am I avoiding, even though I know it matters? This is not something you need to fix immediately, but something to notice, because awareness itself begins to create movement. And once you begin to see what is being avoided or delayed, the pattern becomes clearer. And when the pattern becomes clearer, your response can begin to change. Because real change does not usually begin with a dramatic shift. It begins with a moment of honesty. If this has given you something to think about, take a moment with it. Because often it is not about making a big change immediately, but about noticing something small that begins to shift how you see things. If you feel like this is something you've been experiencing, where you feel stuck despite trying, and where things are not moving in the way you expected, then this is exactly the kind of work I explore more deeply through my Clarity and Confidence Reset one-on-one sessions. You will not get quick solutions in these sessions, but they will help you understand what is really going on beneath the surface, help create clarity, and help you move forward in a way that feels more intentional. If that feels relevant for you, you'll find the details in the description. And if you prefer to begin this process on your own, you can also explore it through my journals, which are designed to help you reflect, understand your patterns, and create space for that clarity to develop over time. I'll see you in my next video. Until then, be happy and stay inspirited. Bye.